Hi, this is part 3 of the Principles of Animation unit, and we're going to be going over how to create a cube with guides. So let me show you the example first. The main point of this exercise is learning how to start making 3D forms that can go back in space. This can be really helpful for envisioning a sense of space in a 2D plane, like if you had a character running back in space or maybe twisting and turning. It helps us start kind of getting away from maybe just doing like stick figure, style of animation to really getting into more like shape and form. Just like all the other ones in this unit, the guidelines are going to be really important. So we're going to start by setting that up. And we're going to be working in 1 point perspective. You can see this front plane of my cube is actually perpendicular to the page. So this is completely vertical. This is completely horizontal. The only things that are going to go back in space are what's called the orthogonals. These are represented by these red lines, and they are going back to the vanishing point. So an orthogonal is just a fancy word for a diagonal going back to that vanishing point in a perspective system. And for right now, I can tell this is 1 point perspective because literally it's going back to 1 point. 1 point perspective means that the front plane is directly facing us. So in this little cube example, you can see the front plane of this cube is both perpendicular to the page and it's also facing us directly. All right, so let's get an example going. So I'm going to go back to gallery. All right, I'm going to click plus and I am going to go to new canvas. There is a time lapse setting that I have found that if I click here, pretty much the original setting is really nice. So the 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080, this is another form of HD. And then I'm just going to keep this on good quality. I don't really want to do studio quality because it's probably going to make the iPad slow down or not give us enough frames. So I'm just going to stick with good quality for now. So time lapse settings, 1080p, good quality, create. All right, from here, I'm going to set up my animation screen. So canvas, so the wrench canvas, and then animation assist. So that'll give me my timeline at the bottom. And first I'm going to set up my first frame. So I'm going to make sure I'm on an inking tool that I like. Technical pen or syrup work pretty well. And then I'm going to show you two things that might help you with your setup. So the first thing is I'm going to create my horizon line, which is where things are going to vanish toward. And you can do this in any direction. I'm actually going to make this just slightly different from my last one. But this is going to be my vanishing point. So I want to label pretty succinctly, not too big. I don't want to make it like huge because that won't be as accurate. I just want to make it understandable for where my piece is going to be going. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is actually draw in the front plane of my cube. Now I'm actually going to do this on the guide layer because I need it to base the rest of my orthogonals around. All right, so that's the front plane of my cube. And now I'm going to take, using this, you can use a straight line tool. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take this going back in space. So I'm just going to do the 3 points. So 1, 2, 3 on that side of the cube. Now you could probably animate it just from here, but I'm actually going to show you one other little thing that's really helpful when we do animations going back in space. So sometimes what I will do is I'm going to actually break up using an angle here. So this is my side. And this is going to represent the side of my next cube. But the reason why it's important to do this is this, it looks like a little letter N. This is not an orthogonal. This is going to represent consistency between my two spaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice that angle and then I'm going to bring it over. So I don't think you need to worry too much about, actually I'll make this a little bit lighter. You don't need to worry too much about what this line is going to represent yet. You're going to see in just a couple minutes what this is going to end up doing. And it's just going to help keep the cube going back in space consistently. All right, so I have my vertical and I'm going to connect that down. 1, 2, 3, practicing that angle. It has to be correct. And then I move on to the next side. So this is going to help it go back in space at a predictable way. Notice how I always pretend to draw that angle, before I move to the next part. And I always make sure all my verticals are straight. And what's going to happen is this is going to start going back in space at a pretty fast angle. So I'm not going to see, maybe quite as many frames back here. Okay, and once you can't really see it anymore, then you can just leave it out. All right, so that's my setup. Again, each one of these verticals is going to represent where I start that next square. It's going to make it just look like it's vanishing back in the distance in a predictable way. All right, I'm going to click on my first frame and then make that background. So that will be a guide layer. Again, if you want it to be a little bit less visible, if you find that too prevalent, you can always reduce your layer 1. All right, layer 2 is where my animation will start. And, I kind of would like you guys to stay away from the straight line tool for this. I mean, I'm showing you just in general how I usually animate because I rarely animate using an actual tool. And you can see I'm using the blue lines, like right here, that represents square 1. So this was my second vertical. So that's going to help me create that side. So I'm using, this is my front plane right here. So this is the side that's facing me. But I'm making basically, if this is horizontal, the back side is horizontal. If this is vertical, the back side is vertical. So everything that is not an orthogonal, these 3 right here are orthogonals. They're going back to that vanishing point. If it's not an orthogonal, it's going to be horizontal or vertical. So that'll kind of help you predict it. All right, and then I'm going to keep working my way up, but this time I'm going to make the front plane moving back a little bit. So I tend to do this L first because I can connect it easily, and then I'm going to just line up using my eyes kind of to see where that square goes. All right, I have my orthogonals, so I'm going to go to the next blue line. So 1, 2, 3. Remember, if it's not an orthogonal, it's either vertical or it's horizontal. So I don't have to think about, adding in the other diagonals in there. Same thing, just going to keep working my way back. Front plane first, 3 orthogonals, and then the vertical and the horizontal to connect. Front plane, orthogonals, connect the back plane. Horizontal, then vertical. I'm on the syrup brush. This isn't my favorite for animating. I like the technical pen a little bit better, but you can use it or you think is better. Front plane, 3 orthogonals, connect the back, vertical, horizontal. Okay, front plane, orthogonals, vertical and horizontal. Remember, you can click add frame at the bottom too if you don't want to go to the layers palette. Front plane, orthogonals, vertical and horizontal. Front plane, orthogonals, vertical and horizontal. Front plane, orthogonals, vertical and horizontal. Front plane, orthogonals, backside, front plane, orthogonals. And as I get down here, it's going to get so small. I just want to make sure I'm keeping the proportions the same. So it's okay if it's not, I would say not exactly perfect at this frame. I'm just trying to make sure that it's following the size down. And at one point, once it gets to the vanishing point, it's going to actually disappear. So for these last couple forms, I'm basically drawing in a square. I'm not even really worried about it being a form because it's going to go back in space so quickly. And remember, you can change your settings. So I'm going to make the frames, I'm going to make them 10 frames a second just so we can see it a little bit slower in playback motion. And you can see that's a very even sort of movement. This is not timed. So this would maybe be good if it's a mechanical movement, maybe a box moving along like some sort of, belt in a factory. But if this was something maybe speeding back in space, I might have last frames back here, so it goes maybe slow to quick instead of an even movement. But this is just to get a sense of it going back in space. All right, guys, take care.